Now from Psalm 40, dealing with the first 8 verses, this psalm is a psalm of David. And David, in writing these verses, was expressing his own experience, but also there was some application in Jesus, his descendant. In fact, I believe very much how the Bible tells us Jesus fulfilled a lot of Scripture. By fulfilled, I mean filled full of meaning. Jesus filled full of meaning David's words here, for Jesus himself experienced some of these things that David had, again, as Jesus as David's descendant. So first of all, in looking at David and how he was his experience in this psalm, David said how Jesus or God had brought him up out of the pit of destruction, out of the miry clay. In the course of our discussion, we talked about how slippery the clay is. The clay and the miry clay is very wet clay. I've had an experience with this in hiking on the Appalachian Trail, and after a rain, after the slopes of the hill that we're going up would be very steep. However, on the Appalachian Trail, the ones who maintain the trail have put rocks along some of these steep ascents, and you're actually walking on the rocks instead of on the miry clay, and that's it's a lot more firm footing. I recall one time when I got off of the rocks, I slipped and actually twisted my knee and had to get off of the trail from backpacking after that time, so I could heal. After about a day or so, we were able to get off the trail. But anyway, I did have an experience in knowing the difference between rocks, walking on rocks and miry clay. You just have a lot more firm footing. David himself had that firm footing in his God. And also in verse 3 of Psalm 40, David talks about having a new song put in his mouth, this song of praise to God. He also speaks about trusting in the Lord. Trust is the very important word in the Bible. It is actually the word faith. Faith in the Bible is faith in action, which is a trust. Faith in God will mean that we trust in God to live our lives in accordance with His Word. So when we trust in God, we believe in the truth that He has given to us, not in falsehood. God has done many wonders for us, as in verse 5. There is certainly none to compare to God. God is unique. There is no other like God. He is outside of time and space. He created this whole universe, and those are His wonders which He has done, this marvelous creation in this world that we see. There is so many, too numerous to count, as verse 5 expresses. Also in verse 6 and following, David is comparing sacrifices and meal offerings. God doesn't really desire those. What God desires is the heart that does those sacrifices and offerings. The heart is what God looks at. Actually, the sacrifice and the offerings are those acts that we do that show what's in our heart. When God set those up in the Old Testament law as part of what to do in order to worship Him and to honor Him, God still looked at the heart, even those deeds and those actions which should express the desire of the heart. That's what God looked at. So the actions themselves don't mean anything if the heart is not in them. If we just go through the motions of ritual, God doesn't honor that as much as how He looks into the heart. So the heart is part of what we give to God, or is what we give to God. And in verse 8, I delight to do Thy will, O my God. Thy law is within my heart. So again, God looks at the heart in carrying out His law. Our deeds, our actions are important things to do, but when we do them with the wrong heart, God does not honor those particular kind of actions.